Good morning, everyone, and you're very welcome to day 2 of the In Effect show. My name is Christina Quigley, Revenue Hacks host and a member of Raise Up here in the European community. We have a fantastic panel ahead of us today. We're having a conversation about specific market recovery strategies in hospitality and entertainment. And I can't wait for you to learn so much from our industry experts and our thought leaders that we have on our panel today. So without further ado, we'll introduce the panel. So Dr. Peter Ritchie cannot be with us today, unfortunately. However, he has submitted a fantastic video that we will be showing to you during the course of the conversation. But I'm going to introduce Brian from CoStar to let you know all about him.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Tack. I am the Director of Market Analytics for CoStar Group. I cover the hospitality sector for CoStar. For those of you who don't know, CoStar is the parent company of STR, with that acquisition taking place about 2 years ago. So I'm going to share with you later today some data on what we see as far as forecasts for the future, as well as some great trends that we're seeing, progressive trends that we're seeing for the market post-pandemic. I've been with CoStar for a while now, but I've been previously 25 years I spent in the hospitality industry, serving as Vice President of Sales and Marketing for a hotel management company based in the Midwest. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on the panel, Brian, and we're so excited about your data. I've been literally buzzing all morning like a bee. Can't wait to see how the rest of the industry is recovering. And Howard.
Yeah, thank you so much. Howard Weiss, Head of Entertainment and Sales Strategy for Area 15, a new immersive entertainment complex here in Las Vegas. I've been with the company for about 2 years, but have spent most of my career in the casino business on the entertainment, hospitality, and nightlife side. And very excited to talk about the recovery as we head into the new normal and a really robust economy and events business. So excited to talk about it.
I love, Howard, how you never even mentioned the fact that you're actually one of the top 40 under 40 in Vegas. You were well known in this industry, in this area. That is something to be shouting about. So I definitely think that's something to say well done to you for.
Thank you so much.
So without further ado, we're going to kick off this conversation because I'm really excited about market recovery and strategies that will help other markets, other cities, and other regions across the world to be able to recover, not just in the USA. So Brian, do you want to take it over with your slides and show us the good news story that's happening right now? We can see your screen, Brian. You just need to unmute yourself.
There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you for having me today. As I mentioned earlier, CoStar Group, parent company of STR. So I'm going to share with you today the latest trends and forecasts that we're seeing from STR. They were just released last week, including some of the slides you're going to see right now. The U.S., when we talk about the pandemic and we look at post-pandemic progression to how this is going to fare out and how the future looks, we see demand really closely correlating to the number of vaccinated individuals, which is very positive. Leads to the reopening of offices, which we know is very important to travel in the future for business travel. And even though many offices are starting to open back up, still there's some slag in corporate HR and legal departments that are reluctant to give the green light to have the floodgates open for travel. So although vaccinations kind of lead in that progression to what our return to office, and also as we look into the future, and you'll see in a couple of slides how we're going to see the market mix and trends that are happening that are impacting those specific dates. So as we move forward, we're going to look at the difference between weekend and weekday. This has been a very, very controversial conversation, but we believe at STR we've got the solid data to prove that we're having some challenges with lags with corporate bookings. It still remains lethargic through all future periods. It tends to, it's showing very gradual improvement, but nothing really to sink our teeth into yet. Group business is slowly beginning to climb out of a steep hole, but still remains depressed, versus the 2019 levels. Everything that we kind of look at as far as the metrics is compared to 2019 index, because if we look at or try to compare it year over year to last year, it's really just it's not a fair and accurate portrayal of how we're doing. So everything is really at STR is compared back to 2019 as the stable year of comparison. So we, 2019 levels, there's still very cold weather markets like Chicago, New York, San Francisco are still struggling because of that lack of return of group business and business travel midweek. The difference between weekend and weekday recovery is really just, leisure business is just, just off the charts, including what we saw from, those peak levels over Memorial Day weekend. They were just phenomenal to see. It's very, very promising and progressive in looking at the future in terms of how the trends are going to happen. Just the uncertainty is just of group and also corporate business travel. It's also going to be a challenge, I think, if we look into the summer markets and knowing that there's going to be a lot of leisure. How does the hotelier staff for 2 compressed room days of the week and then 5 half empty ones? It's just going to be a big challenge as we see labor trying to, as we know, labor is going to be a big challenge. STR is tracked RevPAR index to post-pandemic, and this colorful chart that you're seeing now shows the progression that the United States is making in the recovery stages. As you can see, recently as last week, some markets are still in the depressed stage of recovery, while others are still, at peak again, which is great to see. We see these gaps narrowing within the markets as the recession and depressionary stages, remove or go towards recovery. And this is just really just a promising look and very high level picture, just at RevPAR right now, but very promising none to say the less. I wanted to share with you, I got our latest forecast that just came out. Some of our executives at STR and at CoStar, Jan Freitag, and also Amanda Height presented this at the Hunter conference. But these are the latest trends and forecasts that as we see the 2021 forecast faring out, as well as 2022. As you can see, there's a gradual increase in occupancy over 2020 this time, compared to 2021, that is the end of this year, compared to 2019. There's still some lag, to 2019 levels at a negative 32% index. It's comparable to the year 2010 in terms of looking at it as how it looks and feels as far as performance is. Finishing the year at 58.39 in RevPAR and ADR at 109.47. To look forward into 2022, we see, of course, we're getting up there to that occupancy level that it's not quite to where we wanted it to be, not quite to 2019, still falling short about 17.9% RevPAR at $117.34 in ADR, and ending it with RevPAR at $70.57, comparable to the year 2013. So again, we just see the forecast has been very difficult. We've got so many with tourism economics and our team looking at how we can get as accurate as we possibly can, because that is important. We know a lot of people depend on these forecasts. There's just a lot of moving parts having to do with the midweek piece. And more importantly, I think it's going to be, the indicator, what truly happens after summer, and when the return normally of corporate business and some of the group conventions and citywide business happens. It's going to be really important to watch the trends, the booking trends in advance, to make sure that we've got our hands around that. And we at CoStar and STAR are doing that, just to making every day we're spending time making sure we've got the most accurate numbers we possibly can.
Thank you so much, Brennan. What I think is very interesting is the fact that, every year we can see it growing steadily, and it is comparable to coming out of the recession way back many years ago. And I think people in particular need to realize that we are coming out of a pandemic. However, people have money to spend. People want to get away. People want to vacation. So it's up to you to create correct market strategies and listen to what the panel have to say today to be able to grow and further your own property. And it's not just looking at RevPAR. I'm a huge advocate of looking at GoPAR and total revenue as well, because at the end of the day, your RevPAR is only as good as what your occupancy and rate is. And at the moment, if you're chasing that, it's not going to work. You should be focusing on the bottom line for sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a few minutes break. We're going to actually introduce Peter Ritchie's video. Peter has some very good insights that he's going to share with us, and then we'll come back and continue this conversation.
Hey everyone, I'm Peter Ritchie. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you at the show in person or at the right time spot, but I wanted to do a video and talk a little bit about Florida Atlantic University, our certificate, what we learned about the hospitality workers in our industry, and where we're hoping to go from here. So Florida Atlantic University has about 30,000 full-time students. We're based in South Florida with a main campus in Boca Raton, and we've always had a certificate in hospitality and tourism management that we offer through executive education. Historically, it's been face-to-face during the summertime months, and we have many employers that send their associates, leaders, and supervisors to the program. At the start of COVID-19, around February of 2020, I realized that many of the employers were going to need to have temporary layoffs. So I rushed to get approval to offer a miniature version of the certificate at the 15 hours of content, and to offer it while people were furloughed or taking time off while we were in the height of the pandemic. The certificate somehow went viral, and in the end, we had almost 80,000 registrants for the 15-hour version. We quickly moved during the summer of 2020 to take the entire 40-hour certificate and put it online and offer it at a discount to anyone who was out of work across the globe. In the end, we've had over 80,000+ registrations, of which almost 70,000 have fully completed. Along the way, starting in March and April of 2020, people started to reach out to us and converse with us about their jobs, about the loss of their jobs, and about the industry. It became very apparent by summer that many people were finding jobs in other industries and were feeling somewhat bitter that they had been ousted from the hospitality industry, even though there was no possible way for hotels, restaurants, and cruise lines and such to be operating. These were people who had spent many years in their positions in tourism, and they were suddenly ousted to another industry and discovered, oh, wow, I actually like it. So ahead of the curve, we noticed that many people were exiting the industry completely and sharing their new positions and their newfound activities with others. And many people started to consider that a new reality. They had somewhat higher pay in some cases. In other cases, they had better benefits. In other cases, they were able to work remotely and not have to deal with guests any longer. And there were myriad issues. Some didn't feel safe during the height of the pandemic working with the public, which was completely understandable. Some had childcare duties, you name it. Over time, we put together a survey at the start of 2021 to ask people's perceptions in the tourism business about COVID-19, about their jobs, and about their career path. And the findings were somewhat shocking. If you were in the industry for a while, had risen to a supervisor, manager, leadership role, you were unlikely to leave our industry, but about a third of the people were actively seeking jobs outside the industry over the next 12 months, a third, which is considerable. But even more frightening was the group that were newer to the industry and lower in their position ranks, and almost over 2/3 of those, almost 66 or 67%, of those individuals were actively seeking work outside the industry. They didn't think it paid well enough, it didn't have enough benefits, and so on and so forth. So we saw kind of a new pandemic emerging in terms of a shortage of labor. Sure enough, fast forward to the spring and summer, early summer of 2021, and hotels, restaurants, cruise lines, airlines, theme parks, they are all struggling to find workers. So my goal now is to try to work with senior leaders of various tourism and hospitality companies and maybe create either a think tank or a strategy and see what we could do as an industry. We've always been known as a low pay, high hours type of industry, but the love that people have for our business is evident everywhere. And we love working with people as a general rule. We love the guests. We love the excitement of travel. However, those perks or benefits, whatever you want to call them, inherent pieces have seemed to wane in favor of remote options, better pay, better benefits. So it's no surprise that many people are leaving and have left the industry. Our goal now is to find a method to have slightly higher entry-level wages, better staffing levels so that people are not burned out as quickly and they have a better work-life balance, and maybe improve our benefits so that we can compete with real estate and insurance sales and healthcare and call centers and other areas where these employees have moved on. It's a challenging time. It was very interesting in terms of people reaching out to us and feeling connected during the pandemic. I've probably personally had upwards of 1 to 2 million individual comments, thank you cards, letters, voicemails, etc. All of that anecdotal information pointed to something that was going to occur in terms of an exodus of employees. And that's why we put our research together to kind of see if we could gauge the sentiments. Of the 50,000 that we blasted out to, we had almost 5,000 surveys responded, and about 4,100 of them were completely filled and completely usable, which was a decent response rate in today's busy world. Again, the sentiments were identical to what they had been telling us anecdotally all these months. So as a long-term hospitality professional, I know that we will emerge from this. We emerge from every crisis. The 70s had the gas shortage in the US. The 80s had recessions and tax law changes. The 90s had SARS and Persian Gulf War. Then we had 9/11 and the recessions of the early 2000s. We will emerge. We always do. But this time, we're emerging with a much more difficult search for talent and a lack thereof. We have always had a struggle to find good talent in our industry. It's been an ongoing challenge all 4 decades that I've worked in it. It's always been difficult to find caring, genuine hospitality types who are willing to work nights and weekends and in a venue that might be open 365 days a year. So this has just added another layer of difficulty in finding those workers. So I like to call it a time for soul searching in this industry, and I know that we'll emerge from this. It's a pleasure to chat with you about, very briefly about the journey that I have taken by deciding to do the certificate, offering it during the pandemic, having it go global. We had registrants from 165 countries around the world, and just get an incredible number of comments and feedback and just storytelling about their lives in hospitality and about their frustrations and what they desired to do next, and then put some quantitative measure to it to verify that indeed this is a labor pandemic. I hesitate to use the word pandemic, but we've used it so much lately that it rolls off the tongue easily, and it indeed states what's going on right now. If anyone would like to reach me, please do so. My email is very simple. It's hospitality@fau.edu. Hospitality@fau.edu. Again, my name is Peter Ritchie, RICCI. I'm the director of the Hospitality and Tourism Management Program at Florida Atlantic University, known as FAU, here in beautiful Boca Raton, Florida. I look forward to hearing from any of you that wish to reach out, and I hope you enjoy the conference very much and the show. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Peter. It was very insightful. And I think what's interesting is that so many people have given up their time to help retrain people and encourage people to either further develop themselves within the hospitality sector or help increase their revenues by guest and staff satisfaction, which I think is really important. And I can see how when you were shaking your head there, so you were totally in agreement with me. So let's have a conversation about market recovery and market strategies. I'm so excited for this. And Howard, we had a conversation offline last week and I had goosebumps just talking to you. So I can't wait for the audience to have the same experience. So can you please talk us through what your properties are doing right now to help aid recovery? And what have you been doing since last year to bring your recovery to the forefront right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was incredible to hear some of the data and analysis from Dr. Peter Ritchie, right? In terms of, staffing, it's a big big challenge right now across the industry. But as far as recovery, we opened up in the midst of the pandemic here in Las Vegas, and we had to transform a bunch of our event spaces into restaurants and new activations to think differently and be able to control occupancy and really be able to do stuff during the height of the pandemic. So we started to see a lot of traffic towards the end of the pandemic. The last 2 months have been really promising, as well as future business that's sort of coming through the pipeline later this year. And 2022, in my mind, and other industry leaders believe that it's going to beat out 2018. So we are, the worst is behind us, and there's so many exciting things to happen here. So we are continuing to pivot, and we're probably going to open up some new event spaces in order to be able to support the demand, because what we are seeing right now is the pent-up demand is real, right? There's people didn't do things for 14 months. So everybody's trying to come back and do stuff now. And there's more people and not enough spaces. So I think we'll continue to see that over the next 12 to 18 months. And then hopefully by end of 2022, we'll be back with enough spaces to be able to support the demand.
I think what's really interesting is yesterday we had a conversation with some people in the Vegas government, local government, and I thought was quite cool was the fact that they've actually invested a lot of money in it themselves to be able to help recovery. Do you think that that is key for the rest of the states across the US, for the governments, local governments, to start investing in hospitality recovery to help you guys further a lot more?
I do, because I think some of the other markets are lagging behind, right? Vegas is fully based off tourism. So we need people to be traveling in order for us to be successful, and we need large scale conferences to come back. The other cities that are lagging, they need the support. So whether it's money coming from the government or just ways to help help transform the business and get it back on a solid path is, I think, key for success here.
I think what's really interesting is that, Brian, you touched very briefly on tourism in regards to not just corporate, but also leisure. Do we all expect to see a lot more, I don't know what the right term is, corporate leisure business come together, where you come and you actually go to work for maybe 3 or 5 days and then you stay for the weekend and then you go home? Do you think that's going to be a huge factor in the recovery of the pandemic?
Not a huge factor, but we see it as, it existed before the pandemic as well, in terms of, we saw a lot of corporate travel being, moving into or kind of flowing into leisure as well for vacations, and also just long extended weekends. We noticed that in a lot of the corporate hotels. So I think that it's going to continue. I just don't think it's going to be significant enough to, produce or to put any faith into, huge recovery numbers from that. I think a mobile life, work style is also, of course, playing, a role in that as well. People are working every place that they are in their home lives, and the lifestyles really kind of changed. So some of that does, will bleed into obviously corporate and leisure travel as well. People don't really, there's not defined 9 to 5 terms as much anymore as they existed.
Well, that was my next question, because actually, funny enough, you mentioned that it's like tracking this business. How can you tell anymore if a person is going to be a leisure or a corporate guest, especially when people are encouraged to come to Vegas to work from Vegas?
Yeah, we track really based on the week part, the day of the week, as separating those two. It'd be interesting to see how things move forward, though, if there is a much more ingrained trend in the blend of the two, and how to track that is going to be a very important part. It's easier to do. I mean, it's easier to do to the channel level and to the down to the rate level. So it's not as if it can't exist or won't be able to get access to it. It's just going to be a little bit blurry at first.
Howard, is this something that you're seeing or that you're tracking a little bit differently now, that you've kind of started to see people come in and stay for, work from home, essentially from Vegas?
Yeah, it's not something that we're tracking right now. We're seeing it, we're hearing it. I think as conventions start to come back online in Q4, we'll definitely start to see it. I know for me personally, if I'm traveling somewhere for a convention, and maybe it's Tuesday through Thursday, I may try to pack on, depending on where I'm going, to stay there for the weekend, bring the family out there and really extend that, because to the earlier point, remote work is something I think of the current and of the future now, and people can essentially do their job from anywhere unless they have to be in a facility.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. And I do think tracking is very important, though, from a revenue standpoint, and that's where I've shown for many, many years, tracking and knowing your analytics is 100% the one way that you're going to be able to benchmark yourself correctly against 2019 or even 2018, if you want to go that far back, to be able to help with your recovery. So if you don't have your tracking and your marketing set up correctly, then you need to address that right away, because you're only going to be looking at numbers at a page for no reason or no purpose. Howard, with the events returning, you've just mentioned about reopening some of your areas as restaurants and as other areas to service. Do you think you're going to bring them back into conferencing space eventually, or do you think because of how people have reacted to having it as a restaurant space that you're going to keep it as a restaurant space forever?
No, I think, and we've already started to see it in the last few weeks. We've had to transform them back to the event spaces and what they were initially intended to do because of the demand, and that tourism is picking up and that events are starting to take place now. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but we're building more space to be able to keep up with the demand. So I do think, the folks that have big event spaces will continue to do events in there. Maybe they'll think differently, like what we will do now differently is the event space won't sit dark on a Monday night. We may transform it on a restaurant side on a Monday night, but it's really going to be primarily focused for the events.
And is that with pop-up restaurants? So have you been taking in external companies, or is this something that you guys have been working on internally yourself with your own chefs and your own kitchens?
It's a combination of the two. We've done some stuff internally, and then there's been one-off events where we've turned, a 30,000 square foot outdoor space into an outdoor roller rink. And we brought in food trucks, et cetera, to really help support the demand.
Oh my gosh, I wish I could have been there for that. That would have been absolutely epic. I love the way Brian is like shaking his head too. It's really interesting to see how this is happening. And when we're talking about the event space and we're talking about recovery, I think it's really important that we touch on the fact that it will return. In some places like Vegas, it's actually returning a lot quicker. However, there is some states that are lagging behind, as you mentioned, Howard, and Brian has shown. So what can we offer as advice to these states going forward to be able to encourage them to, to start getting their marketing plans in place or their strategies in place? What can you guys offer to these people?
I would say that they need to think differently and creative. I think the consumer and the folks that are coming out for the events are looking for different types of spaces from a creativity standpoint. But the hybrid, right? The hybrid type events where 50 people can be there live in person and 50 people can zoom in. I think that's a real big part of the future here. So to be able to do that and to be able to get the technology in place, get the website set up, and really be able to market to that consumer will help get them set up for success.
Brian, do you have any words of wisdom?
Absolutely. It's really to be diligent with your data and understanding who your customer is today and the future by understanding and monitoring very closely what you see as performing matrix and all different categories of consumer demand, because it's important that you're not assuming that everything is the same as it was, or it's going to return the same as it was. It's a different, really, consumer world and demographics, as well as what people's preferences are and their choices and what they're doing for travel is very important. That to compete, you're going to really have to be diligent about spending time with understanding who the customer is.
I love, Howard, how you touched on innovation, because the last year or nearly 16 months has actually been pushed by innovation and technology. And I think that's something that people have forgotten about. Touchless technology, we use it on a daily basis, and I do believe that this is something that hotels and events should actually adopt sooner rather than later. Have you and your teams adopted QR codes for menus? Have you done the whole contactless check-in? So, you can check in from your mobile, get your key. What do you think is the way forward for that?
Yeah, great points. We had a lot of these things in the works, pre-opening. We are a technology-based company. So the first thing we did quickly was we did the QR codes for the menus. And from my standpoint, it's something that will never change, because from an operator standpoint, it's easy. I can change a menu within 5 minutes versus before with a paper menu, getting them dirty, making sure that, people are not drawing on them or whatever. Now we have the QR codes. People can remote in. We can make a change in real time, whether we 86 an item or anything like that. And then from a ticketing standpoint, everything being virtual, we implemented the thermometer checks and the security scanning at the doors. I think those will continue to be a part of the future as well, because we're now able to identify the customer a little bit better and understand their pattern throughout throughout the facility. So I think a lot of that technology will stay there. And I think it will actually help the operator, be a little more efficient in their day-to-day.
I love how you mentioned smaller checks, because to be honest with you, obviously a lot of places across the world have adopted this, but no one has done it so cool as, the scanning the face, taking the image, and the temperature like Vegas has done. I've only ever seen one property here in Ireland who actually does it very similar. Do you think that's going to be a way forward in the future? So we're talking 2 years away. Do you still think that that would still remain within properties?
So I don't know about the thermometer piece. I do think that will continue to fizzle out as far as, as COVID continues, those numbers continue to drop. I think that will go away. What I think will continue to stay is that type of technology to be able to track the customer. Like we're able to track our customers throughout our property now about what venues they go to, how long they're there, average spend per customer. So we're able to track all of that from the facial recognition standpoint, which I think is so unique.
This is voyeurism, 100%. This is bringing me to my next part, which is social media, because social media is going to be very crucial in a recovery, for sure. And Howard, you were a social media whiz. I've seen everything that you guys post. And how important has social media been to drum up an audience for you, to encourage people to come and stay, either with you or in Vegas in general? It's the storytelling.
Yeah, so I think it's been really beneficial for us, and obviously will continue to be a part of what it was in the past and what it will be in the future. What really helped us during COVID, and I think what will continue to stay in place, is people want to feel safe. They want to feel that they're in a clean environment, and that everything is sanitized appropriately. I think all of that stuff will stay. So to continue to be able to manage that and message that on the social media platforms is key. So one of the things that I won't miss is the enforcement of mask wearing, right? I think, as that continues to fizzle out, it was very important for us to manage that, to make sure from a social media standpoint that our guests here were safe, but that we were also talking to future consumers so that they would feel safe if they were to book a trip here.
I totally agree. I can't wait to not go into a building and wear a mask, for sure. It detracts, and that's the one thing when you're working in hospitality and you put your staff wearing a mask, no one can see you smile. And your smile is what sells everything. You can always tell someone how friendly they are from a smile. And that is like, yesterday I was out and I have to say to people, you don't realize, but I am smiling under here. I swear, I really am. But in regards to actually tapping into markets, I find that social media in particular is very useful, because you're able to get very deep down and granular when it's coming to marketing to your audience. And I definitely think properties, as we come out of this pandemic, really need to start investing properly into social media and into their PPC and their SEO, because that is going to be crucial to be able to help grow either your domestic or international travel once the international guest starts to return.
Yep, totally agree. And I think one of the pieces that we rolled out, and I've used it in the past, is we've tapped local social media influencers that have a large following, and we get them here on site to experience everything that we have to offer, and then they share it with all their fans and the consumers. So I think that will continue to be a part of it. It's an inexpensive way to also market to customers and really be able to get out to a large group of people that are interested in doing what you have to offer.
I definitely agree 100%. And influencers are the way to go, because you know what, everyone's sitting at home, sitting on their sofa, scrolling. They're sitting on the bus, they're scrolling. And it's one way of being able to tap into them as a lifestyle. In particular, if you have lifestyle properties, it's really important. Brian, you did show us some really interesting slides, and I want to go back, because let's go back to the RevPAR slide, because I thought that was really, really cool to see that there's almost a $12 increase year on year in the recovery stage forecasted by STR. Does STR think that by 2023, going into 2024, will almost be close to pre-pandemic, or is it something further away? Because at the start, you must remember, this time last year, we all thought it was going to be over in October. We were all convinced this was going to be gone by October.
And we see it as the recovery is going to be kind of a variable, stage to recovery, because some markets are going to recover faster, as you can see, than others. So is there, to really say that we'll be back fully, by 2019 or 2024, I guess, is really not a real accurate statement for certain markets. They're just not going to be there. We even see some even, happen even quicker, with, some of them even by next year being, fully recovered, just depending, of course, on the mix of business and mix of sales and how they adapt in their products and to their markets, really.
I definitely think Vegas is one of those ones that have adapted really, really well. So has, Miami, that has just flourished as well at the same time. And I definitely think that people can use that. I understand that it's not a one strategy fits all, but there is certain elements that you can take from people's strategies to help drive even the small towns, especially because I remember speaking last week, we were on about the increase in driving vacations. People now want to drive across the states. People now want to go back to how hotels were founded, which is traveling from one to another, not having a booking and taking just a whim, which I think is quite interesting because, we spend so long trying to plan a vacation that people want to do this. It's just mind blowing for me right now. Howard, are you starting to see that trend trickle to you, that people are just coming, 0 days notice to Vegas in particular?
Yeah, and a lot of that typically happens, within the last 24 hours in terms of, big festivals and big events that are happening. And obviously a big feeder market for Vegas is California. And those traffic levels continue to increase, from Thursday to Sunday. And people are just trying to figure it out. The challenge with Vegas, especially as conventions come back, is those room rates are going to skyrocket. So people will be able to find rooms. They just won't be on the strip. And they'll probably have to pay a premium if they're not booking in advance.
I think that happens though, and I think people are well prepared for that. Let's be honest, if they're not prepared for it, then there's something wrong, because we've gone through this rigmarole every year, every few years, that once event is actually announced, it just flies right away. Let's be honest. But I do think people have changed, their pocket pricing has changed. Everyone now they're willing to pay a premium price once they have the value add that goes with it. They don't want to get room only. They actually don't want to have to pay $50 for breakfast. They want to have either breakfast included, or they want to have some extra amenity for sure. So is there any top tips that you could offer, Howard, to people to actually look at their amenities as a value add rather than actually see it as an extra cost that they're throwing away to a consumer?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces, right? We bundle a lot of stuff together because we want people to really get, just good value for what we have to offer. So group packaging stuff is great. If you don't have a hotel, associated with your venue, to be able to partner with the hotel, so you can just offer more in a package than somebody can come get if they're getting it a la carte.
And I love that, because at the end of the day, we're all about kind of giving that extra to the customer. It's been 14 months. They haven't been able to travel. Let's get them in the door. And I think people need to realize that for sure. But I also think it's the same thing when it comes to your staff. You need to retrain your staff, educate them, as Peter did say. But it's also, hospitality has a really bad rap. We have, unsociable hours, it's not great work, low pay, but that's not always the story. That is never always true. And we touched on this yesterday, but definitely the media have to start sharing the good news stories on how a career in hospitality can change your life. It really and truly can. Like Brian, he was a sales manager. He's now sitting in one of the biggest data analytic companies across the world. Howard, you're top 40 under 40. I have come through many jobs to get where I am, but I would never change it for the world. I've been able to travel the world because of my job. And I think that's where owners in particular need to start looking at not just value adds for their customers, but also for their guests. Not for their guests, but for their teams and their staff. You need to incentivize your staff to come to work every day.
Yeah, I think the truth is, what we get, the opportunity to work in this incredible environment each and every day. And I do think operators and business owners need to be able to take care of their employees, because in turn, they're going to take care of their customers. So a little bit more, whether it's an employee incentive program or, a couple of extra dollars per hour, that is going to pay off, because they're going to be laser focused on customer service.
100% agree. And I'm a big advocate of points. If you're in a branded chain, give your team extra points for doing something, because you know what, the points cost you nothing, absolutely nothing. And it's a great way as well to get your team to be able to go and stay in another branded property across the portfolio that you may have, for sure. And I do think that's key to the recovery, because as you did mention, they are the focus when it comes to customer service. And if you have someone who's sitting in the bar who's on an incentive program, they're going to upsell absolutely everything that they can. Yep,
100%.
I won't mind paying $100 for a champagne when I've got someone standing at me having a smile on their face. It's the way forward for sure. Before we finish, I do want to kind of have a quick conversation about how we're now looking for 2023. So, Howard, events are coming back for sure for 2023. Are you starting to see a huge amount of inquiries coming in? Have you got business on the books? what is the situation like? And I'm looking at 2 years out, because there's no point looking at next year, because we're still going to be in that pent-up demand phase.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's starting to pick up again. 2022 and 2023 are big topics of conversation right now, more for the large groups of 5 to 10,000 consumers coming to a trade show or coming to an event. So it is exciting. Our books are picking up right now. And I think I mentioned this earlier, it's just we need more event spaces. And I think we're going to start to see an increase in demand and just not enough spaces.
I think that's really interesting, especially when you say the smaller groups of 5 to 10,000. That's, for some people, that's a dream if they can't get even a group of 5 to 10 people in. But definitely, I do think that 2023 will probably be the year of conferencing globally, for sure, because there's been so many conferences that's been extended and put out that we haven't been able to actually host. So I do think it's not just sporting events, it's also the conferencing side and the entertainment side, like concerts. It's going to be a huge boom in concerts.
Yeah.
Them rates are going to be skyrocketing. So if anyone wants to go to Vegas right now, go on vacation in the next 6 months. Do not wait 6 months, more than 6 months, or anywhere for that matter, because once concerts start coming back, the NFL is coming back, everything is coming back to having crowds. You're not going to get a room anywhere.
Where I live in Chicago, actually, Lollapalooza is actually coming back this year in August, which is a huge number. And we're very much welcoming that, as well as some of the conventions. RSNA, which is the largest radiology conference and association, is bringing their convention of 130,000 attendees back to Chicago the end of November of this year. So it's coming back. It's just going to trickle in, and I think when they see everything is safe and everybody's comfortable, and safe being the most important variable, there's going to be a lot more of that. The booking window is so short right now on everything. It's just that everyone's kind of wait and see and still a little bit hesitant, but I think it's going to come back in volume.
I totally agree. And the one thing I will say is, because the booking window is short, if you were afraid that somebody's eating your lunch in your area, start looking at your CoStar reports or your STR reports and your OTAs. Check back on where your rate is and know the biting point of the customer. Because you know what, you can't keep holding your rate sky high and dropping it last minute. That is just ridiculous. That is not revenue management.
I agree.
It's not, though. You're only going to wash away everything that you have. And if your consumer sees, because we're in this now age where you have a 24-hour cancellation policy, or even on the day cancellation policy, Google sends a pricing alert to your customer. What happens? Your customer cancels the high rate and books the cheap rate. I love the way Howard is shaking his head, but we're seeing this still. This is still a trend. That is actually not a strategy. That is stupidity when it comes to revenue management, for sure.
Yep, totally agree.
And then that's where your RevPAR will drop back just exponentially, and you won't be able to actually recover. Simple as. And we've seen it, though. We've seen industries, we've seen hotels across the world, and even event spaces across the world just slash their pricing 100% because of COVID. Now, I understand they do need to drive demand to their property. However, if there's no demand in your area at that particular time, doing that isn't the wisest way of making money. It's being innovative, as Howard did mention. They open some of their spaces into restaurants. That is exceptional. That's a great way of thinking outside of the box. And I do think outside of the box thinking is going to be what drives the strategy, for sure. But it's also having a conversation with your teams and knowing what's right in each department. Howard, I'm pretty certain you probably sat down with a lot of the teams that you work with to actually have everyone's input into how you guys can have a recovery as speedy as what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's so important in any business, right? Or the from the frontline team members all the way up to the executive team, right? And especially the frontline team members who are there every day. They're getting the customer feedback. They know what customers want, and they're getting that input. So sitting down with your teams, it will be, analytics is great, but actually sitting down and talking to people, you'll get the most bang for your buck there.
It's invaluable information, for sure, especially when it comes to the guests. Like you said, these people are the forefront off the hotels, off the event spaces, and they know what the customer wants. They know that the customer doesn't want to pay $200 for just a room. They know that the customer won't pay $30 even for a burger right now. But unless we start listening to these people, there's no way we're going to recover together. And it's also about breaking the silos, because again, we work in an industry that is very siloed. Sales and marketing does that role, revenue does their role, ops takes care of everything else. And to use that phrase, it's not my job. That doesn't cut it anymore after the pandemic, because everyone's job became all of our jobs during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think looking at your distribution at hotels is extremely important as well, because a third party, obviously, they gained so much traction over the years, especially after the lack of entry in the .com market quickly enough. And then, of course, taking the share of margin from hotels' profitability. So I think now we almost have a little bit of a slightly of a restart button to kind of look at those relationships closely if you can, and also see if there's a way that you can get more direct business to your properties, because that ultimately is going to drive you a better profit than giving a large percentage of the way to somebody else to sell for you.
Couldn't have said it better myself, especially when it comes to that. Online distribution is key. Know where your business is going, know where your rooms are being sold. Gentlemen, I'm afraid we've actually run out of time. Unfortunately, I would like to thank everyone for attending our session this morning, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of InnoFact. Can I actually get everyone as well to remember that you can go onto the Gript platform on the Truly Expo. You can actually network with everybody and have open conversations with everybody that's there. And we will also be on the Expo Gript platform. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.